Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome all of you to the SkillsFuture Month in collaboration with Smart Nation 2021, organized by SkillsFuture Singapore and Smart Nation Singapore. Our speaker, Kirk Werner, will be sharing the topic, the new path of lifelong learning. Throughout the session, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A tab that you see on the right panel. Do take note, questions will be moderated. Kirk, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Celeste, and thank you very much for having us here. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Kirk Werner. I'm the Vice President of Content at Udacity, and I'm here with my friend and compatriot, Zena Acker, also from Udacity. She'll be helping with the moderation of the questions and a few of the slides later on in the presentation. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please, like Celeste said, put them in the Q&A section and we'll get to them toward the end. I'm going to go ahead and reset my screen for presentation, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so welcome everyone to the presentation on the new path of lifelong learning. I have to say that lifelong learning is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I consider myself a lifelong student and I'm engaged in continuous learning. And I want to show exactly why that's important, where the idea comes from, but also why it's so important in today's modern world to be on that path of lifelong learning. So you can be successful in both your personal life and your work life. So lifelong learning was defined earlier by the EU Commission on Adult Learning as ongoing, voluntary, and self-motivated pursuit of knowledge for either personal or professional reasons. And it's important to look at that and say it's voluntary and self-motivated. Lifelong learning isn't the kind of thing that somebody tells you you have to get done. It's something that you want to embody and grow within yourself. And that's one of those things that we're going to see later on, the real benefits, what you'll see and get out of that lifelong learning principle. And that it not only enhances active citizenship and personal development, but also self-sustainability as well as competitiveness and employability. Being a lifelong learner means being interested and curious about the world around you and looking for ways that you can continually grow your skills. A lot of us who have gone through a university system have been trained for a particular point of view, but we also picked up skills like critical thinking, how to communicate yourself through clear writing and clear verbal communication. Those are lifelong learning skills that can be developed over time. And it's those kinds of skills, along with the curiosity and growth in technical capabilities, that are the real benefits of lifelong learning. So this is a graphic that I love. I borrowed this from a website that I like, and it shows some of those benefits of the lifelong learner. That they have curious minds. They're constantly looking for another idea and how do these things connect to each other and where does that idea come in? They're always putting things together, and it keeps you constant with that changing world. It puts you in a mindset that says, I'm not going to be happy with where we are now. I'm going to be happy if I'm continually evolving into the next. And so that's something important to think about. And if you think about this benefit of lifelong learning, it's how can I be always open to the next? And so you're always building new skills and improving those you already have. It's easy to say that I finished that course in nuclear physics, or I finished that course in JavaScript, and so I don't need to continually evolve. But we all know that what you need more than anything is to continue to develop those skills that you have, continually work on them, practice them, and that's where real mastery comes in. And we'll look at that a little bit later in the presentation as well. Another benefit of lifelong learning is an open mind and increased wisdom. And what I mean by that is, how do I continually be open to the new idea? A lifelong learner understands that they don't know everything, and so they're constantly looking for, how can I further understand and develop what I know? It improves memory and increases self-esteem, because a knowledgeable person, I mean, the phrase actually is, knowledge is power. A knowledgeable person, or a person that's constantly trying to know, is going to be bettering themselves all the time, whether it's learning how to use a cricket bat, learning how to play Parcheesi, or actually just learning how to sit down and program your DVR. All of those learning aspects, all of those things, trying to acquire new skills, everything constantly drives you forward, makes you a better lifelong learner. And then obviously in a business context, it creates and encourages opportunities for a better job. The more I can look at the skills that I've developed and look for new skills to continue to grow into, the more likely I am to be able to use those skills in a new capacity. So I want to talk a little bit about the traditional learning model, and then we'll kind of get into how the online learning model is different. So the traditional learning model is what we call this learn and earn model. So you learn for 20, 25 years, and then you earn for 45 years. Learning is very traditional learning. There's a time and place to acquire that knowledge. You go to school for it. You attend classes for it. It's time boxed. You're going to finish this over the next 6 months. You're going to do this project for the next 2 years. It's often grouped by age. At this age, you're in grade 3. At this age, you're in grade 6. At this age, you're in grade 12. The curriculum for every year is predetermined. You have to complete this work to move on to the next grade. If you don't complete this work, you'll be held back. If you do more, you might be able to skip forward, but it's predetermined that in this year, this curriculum will be finished. It has intermittent milestones, like you're going to graduate from primary school, you're going to move on to secondary school, you might move on to a university education, and it has assessment checkpoints along those paths. So to go from one stage to another, you obviously oftentimes have to take a test. That test is often based on rudimentary, repeatable information. That it's something I can pull into my brain and that's regurgitate several months later, several years later, rather than actually knowing how to find the answers. It's very structured. And then down the road in a traditional learn model is where specialization might happen. You might be able to go to a university or a trade school or even an apprenticeship program that is very defined in terms of what you're going to get at the end of this in terms of your employed skills. So you're going to learn to be an architect. You're going to learn to be a programmer. You're going to learn to be a data scientist. You're going to be very structured in your path to get there, and you're not going to have encouragement to learn a lot from the outside. You'll be given opportunities, what I call serendipitous learning, but you're not going to be encouraged to explore lots of other pathways because your path is well determined and you have a certain amount of time to get through it. Then in your next 40 years, you're in the earn mode. That earn mode of the workplace is where you apply the knowledge you've acquired, but only if it's directly related to the learn phase. So you go to the learner university to become a data scientist, you go to the earn phase and you're working as a data scientist. The thing is, once you're in this earn phase, it's not always a completely merit-based system. Some things are not measured by how well you do some things. Sometimes it's measured by how long have you been in this position, or what is your current title to say, are you worthy of another position? New knowledge and skills are not presented in a curriculum format. It's not designed to say, here are the 3 steps you have to do to do this job to get to the next level. It's often presented as, here are the job requirements for those roles. You have to figure out how to fill them. So there's not as much direction given. Oftentimes, even within the workplace, there's not clear pathways for how one individual would get to another position without them finding it out for themselves. And it's not easy to understand where those new opportunities might be found. So for example, when you're working in an organization, it's not always clear what other opportunities you have in the organization because there's not an understanding of what your skill set is. It's that you were hired for this position, and then they assume you're going to stay in that position for a determined amount of time and then maybe move up to another position. But what if you want a different pathway altogether? What if you feel your skills would be better used in another department? those opportunities are not easily understood in the organizational or the earned workplace. It's not necessarily easy to build those pathways inside of an organization. And that's something where online education and lifelong learning can actually really help. Having the mindset that you're going to be constantly learning and constantly evolving means that you're searching for new opportunities to learn as well. So the historical learning timeline, and I have one arrow just pointing back into the past, and that's because the early university educational system and the trade and apprenticeship system started over 1,000 years ago, where the first universities were built. But trade and apprenticeships have been going on for millennia. Blacksmiths, potters, weavers always took on apprentices that would learn the craft and then become a master over time, a very clear path. There wasn't a lot of serendipitous opportunity. And so when you hear about individuals who were more of a polyglot, somebody who knew a lot of things in the world, a Da Vinci, for example, they dabbled in a bunch of different things. They understood mathematics and painting. They could do architectural drawings as well as develop strong drawing skills. It was all those abilities to be like a lot for different skills. That was very unusual, and you see those people being called out over time. But as we get into the 1800s and into the 1900s, the university model becomes more available to a larger group of people. It's no longer an elite structure of the Oxfords and the Bolognas of the past. It's now anyone in the middle class areas can strive for a university education, but that education creates very structured outcomes. Again, you're going through a degree program that says, I want to be a this. I want to be a teacher. I want to be an architect. I want to be a programmer. And so you get these very structured programs. And because there's a lot of barriers to entry into the university system, people don't come out with a more balanced and a more open education. They literally just know the thing they know in a lot of cases. As you see on the bottom line, the innovation curve is also starting to explore new ways of conveying information rather than just, I've got content coming across in books and apprenticeships and the university system. I'm starting to see the possibility of conveying information over radio waves, over television, through the PCs, through applications, and then finally through the internet. And as we see the growth of technology, where technology is becoming more of a digital technology, it is important that the university system starts to evolve. The thing is, it doesn't evolve quickly. And so what happens is, and I can speak to this from my experience in publishing and digital education, the digital education market starts to outstrip the university market. And we start building content that people can consume so they know what they need to do to get that job to be successful. And we can convey it to them just in time, where it doesn't require them to go to a university system. They can actually log into a website, see content presented in front of them that gives them those practical outcomes of all the new technologies that are being built. And so it's a lot easier for an online education provider to provide a lifelong learning opportunity because we can add new content very quickly. It doesn't have to be required to finish a degree. It's just content that has to be consumed. And so oftentimes you'll see, as the technology starts to continue to evolve, the right place to learn that technology and stay at that cutting edge is in the online format, basically taking advantage of the technology that's being developed, use that technology to consume new ideas and new content and build that kind of healthy lifelong learning methodology. So what are some of the driving forces behind lifelong learning in today's world? So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these disruptive forces and what the education 4.0 or the modern online education models can kind of build. So the first disruptive force is that 100-year life. So it's often said that the life expectancy of people 500 years ago was 30 years. Well, it's kind of a misnomer because really what you had is very high infant mortality rates, but people often lived until their 60s and 70s. It was just a much different kind of life. You were required to work very hard to find food, to develop skills. It was very manual work. But I think now what you hear in the idea of the 100-year life is that more individuals have the time to develop the skills on their own of what they want to do. You don't have to go through a 10-year apprenticeship program to learn how to be a blacksmith. You can actually learn how to do that more quickly. You can evolve in the new technology. Oh, okay. You can develop new technology skills by taking technology courses. You don't have to go back to a university system, excuse me, to get that. Another one of the disruptive forces is the tools of automation. Automation is an easy thing to see when you look at the development of transportation technology. You know, when you go from the horse and buggy to car to, what cars look like today. When you look at flying devices, from balloons to zeppelins to aircraft and you see the changes that are happening in technology. But the same thing applies to the technology that we're developing today. Individuals who knew how to code 30 years ago were coding in languages that we don't use today. And so to be at that kind of edge of technology, you have to be able to evolve, learn new languages, evolve your use of those languages, understand how new technologies and new innovations can be integrated into what you've learned before and continue to expand your learning. If you don't, it becomes very transactional. Okay, I learned Python, now I'm going to learn SQL. But the reality is, you don't just learn SQL and then stop. You constantly evolve your skills and how do you use SQL in this environment? How do I use Python in that environment? And so what's going to happen is automation will always drive the next thing because it's going to automate the old thing. Whether it's setting up basic databases or building basic workflows that used to take us 2 or 3 days to do, now can be automated to take seconds. Another disruptive force is that the cost of information is zero. In the world, and it's not purely zero, but it's possibly zero. In a world where I can access any fact in the world at my fingertips in less than 15 seconds, I can access informational content about any subject that I can at least start to understand what it's about. Now, it might not be good training material, it might be good instructional material, but I can find informational material. I can go to Wikipedia and look anything up. It no longer requires me to own a set of encyclopedias or a library card even, or to have an expert that I have to ask. I can go and ask the internet every single day and get that information. And so that's extremely disruptive to the idea of where do I go to learn something? I literally don't have to do anything more than just pick up my phone. And that leads to the ability of increased accessibility and connectivity, where the access to information is so much broader than it used to be. You know, having that computer in your pocket that's 10 times more powerful than the one I first had on my desk. Those things allow for that conveyance of information in a much more positive way. And then big data and processing power. The fact that you can crunch numbers in milliseconds, and we count things in terms of milliseconds, when it used to be we had to count things in terms of days. So how does Education 4.0 kind of deal with these issues? The first is microlearning, looking at what is the institutional element that I need to know about that topic, and how can I consume it as quickly and understand it as quickly as possible. Now, microlearning can be a misleading word. Yes, you can get information about a topic in a very small amount of time, but learning requires practice. And so you have to find a way to include understanding or informational content with instructional or practice content. And that's where microlearning is more than just watching a video or sitting in a classroom, it's practice. The second is a flipped classroom. So for those of you who don't know, the term flipped classroom applies to do your reading outside of class and then you come into class to discuss. The idea is that the agency for doing all of the work is done outside of the traditional classroom experience. And what the classroom is used for, what the connection of individuals is used for with an individual instructor, is the questioning of what happened within the assignments, rather than let's read this together or do a project together. It's how do we solve problems in the flipped classroom. A third is alternative credentials, where it used to be the only way to show that you knew something well enough was to have a diploma that said, I have a degree in X from an accredited university. Now you can have strongly accredited online presences that can tell you, based on your completion of this work and your completion of this project, now that is proof that I have these business skills that are transferable from any institution that I go to. Another disruption for the Education 4.0 is personalized learning. No longer does an individual have to go through the same program that every individual went through to get to that end goal. An understanding can be made from their skill map to say, you already have 3 of these 10 skills. Why don't I just focus on the 7 you don't have, instead of teaching you the 3 that you do? So an individual can present their what I call a skills suitcase and say, I already know these 20 skills. I just need 5 more to be successful in that role. And you can focus their personalized learning experience on the things they need to know to be successful, rather than putting them into a one-size-fits-all degree program. And finally, field experience. Understanding that you have to have that practical experience in the work, what we call ready on day one experiences, so that you know that those skills are practically learned and practically you're able to practically express them, rather than spending a lot of time watching and consuming video or consuming content. And then when it goes to actually do the job, you haven't gotten that practical experience. And so Education 4.0 will be driving a lot of that on-the-job field experience for people as well. What are some of the issues that you see with lifelong learning? One is the kind of doom and gloom that people have about it. 30% of the tasks in 60% of the occupations can be automated today. There are entire jobs that can be replaced with an automated feature or automated functions, whether that be an actual automated machine like a robot, or if that's literally just automated RPA functions within a workflow. There are a lot of things that can be automated today, and we're going to see a lot more of that as we grow in the next 5 years. More and more jobs will have pieces of it being automated, because an artificial intelligence can actually do something better. For example, we have a strong use case in our AI for Healthcare program that a chest X-ray can be read more effectively with an artificial intelligence than by a doctor. And the studies actually bear that out. Does it mean that we don't need doctors reading for cancer on chest X-rays? No, of course we still do, but they can be augmented by artificial intelligence to provide better answers and better results. And the second doom and gloom that people hear a lot about is how many jobs will be lost. This is one of those statistics that it always seems to go up, but 1 billion jobs could be lost worldwide by 2030. Based on just the technology and the growth of technology. And so if you want to be a lifelong learner, you have to understand that the job you're doing today may not be around tomorrow. And you want to evolve into what are the areas that are going to be successful in 5 years and 10 years? How can I continually evolve my life, evolve my criteria, evolve my skills so I can be successful in 5 or 10 years? So what are some of the good things? A new era of human creativity where barriers to being a scientist or a business owner really disappear. Will it be a requirement to have a degree in a particular topic when you can show that you've actually built all of the skills, you've practiced all the skills, you can show your portfolio of work to say, look, I've done the work. I don't need a degree from a fancy university. I can show you that the online work that I've done in combination to the other criteria educational work that I've done shows that I am skilled in this. And then the rise of the creative economy where humanity will flourish. There are some things that our human intelligence is much better attuned to than an artificial intelligence. Those skills will be the ones that are most in demand and most credible going forward. And I think that we can spend the most time developing those skills, we'll be much better off in the long run. And I think that lifelong learners will be the right person positioned for that. So briefly, I want to talk about the learning curve. With 45 minutes a day for 1 month, you can have a good understanding of any individual topic. The other end of that is 10,000 hours, which is 3 hours a day for 9 years. Not a lot of people have time to give to that kind of a skill, but you can find yourself somewhere in the middle where you have a strong understanding or knowledge and practical application of a skill by just committing an hour a day for a month, or 30 minutes a week for 3 months. You can actually develop strong skills by regular practice. And that's the most important part, regular practice. Lifelong learners are constantly evolving and thinking and learning. And so get into that mindset, the idea of being curious all the time and developing your mindset. That's what a lifelong learner will move up from embarrassingly bad to strong or very strong at a particular skill. So online learning solves this gap by giving individuals access to multiple learning environments and pedagogical options. You don't have to just read your content if you have an online experience to fill that gap. You don't have to just watch video. You don't have to just do practical work. You can do a combination of all of those things, and it's probably best that you do. Most learners need a combination of pedagogical options to really be able to ingest and consume and then represent that information in new ways. Not just regurgitate the information on an assessment, but able to take the information, synthesize it, and then apply it in new environments. Blended learning experiences online that give you both asynchronous and synchronous opportunities, which means having group activities where they're all standing together, as well as working on your own time and working on your own schedule. Online can provide both of those experiences. Online learning builds on discrete learning elements, breaking complex topics into smaller, digestible, manageable learning atoms. This is a big point for me, and it's been something I've been working on for 20 years, and that is, how do I break this down into smaller, digestible chunks that then build into a bigger continuum? Because ultimately you'll learn and understand and be able to apply the smaller pieces rather than if you sat and watched 4 hours worth of video in a row. If you do it in digestible chunks, you'll consume it and understand it better. It delivers educational opportunities to a global audience with universal access. Online education is accessible from any place on the planet with any kind of online, any kind of internet connection, and it can be made available in any languages possible. So online education has a much broader reach and the ability to get into the hands of anybody who wants it or needs it. And it gets you to learn by doing versus just learning by watching. You want to invest in what we call lean in education, content in my fingertips, versus lean back education. The idea is I can watch as many Marvel movies as I want. I'm never going to be Captain America, but if I lean in and put my hands on the keyboard, I might become the next Tony Stark. So I wanted to highlight some of the role of online instruction in the future of work. 1 billion jobs could be lost by 2030. 375 million people will need to change their jobs over the next 10 years. That's an enormous population. The good thing is there's a lot of spending being done. 1.4 trillion will be spent on digital transformation in the next handful of years. And 2/3 of L&D professionals around the world are focused on rebuilding and reshaping their organizations through learning. And that learning is going to happen in an online format. So unlocking infinite possibilities, you want to break the emotional barrier by being constantly curious and demonstrating that interest with humility, being passionate, discovering not only your innate talents, but how you can positively reinforce that, and empathy. It allows you to become an active citizen. And then get on a learning curve, break down the skill, learn to self-correct, be comfortable with self-correcting, understanding that it's okay to make mistakes and then do a different direction. And then remove barriers. Everything that can come out and to remove those barriers is the most important thing. Break down the skills, learn to self-correct, and remove the barriers so that you can enter the learning whenever you need to. And now I'll turn it over to Zena for a little bit.
Thanks, Kirk. So hi, everyone. My name is Zena, and I am one of the program managers at Udacity, and I'm personally super excited to be here with you today. And what a great segue from Kirk's presentation to introduce you to our program, Noitgeit, Get IT. So this program is in partnership between Temasek Polytechnic and Udacity, which furthers the goal of Singapore's national AI strategy that launched back in 2019 to deepen the country's use of AI technologies and transform the economy. Demand for workers versed in AI is at an all-time high, and programs like this one, so programs like Noitgeit, Get IT, will help more Singaporeans and Singaporean residents gain the necessary skills to assume and excel in these roles. So very similar to the same concept of lifelong learning and what this program sort of provides Singaporeans. So in our first cohort, we are focusing on AI. So on that same strategies, a Singapore-wide strategy. So we're focusing on AI and machine learning, and which we are offering 3 different nanodegrees. Nanodegrees are essentially 3 to 6 month long certification credential built by and for industry, focused on skill competency. So our nanodegrees are bite-sized. They focus on real world projects and have one-to-one mentorship and coaching. So for this program, for the first cohort rather, we're focusing on AI programming with Python, which is essentially, it helps you build the foundations for building your own neural networks. The second program is Introduction to Machine Learning with TensorFlow. And this essentially will help you learn machine learning techniques such as data transformation and algorithms that can find patterns in data and apply machine learning algorithms. And thirdly and lastly is the Machine Learning Engineer Nanodegree. And this course concentrates on training the learner to become a machine learning engineer and apply predictive models to massive data sets across various fields. If you can go to the next slide, please, Kirk. So the Noitgeit, Get IT program structure, it has a combination of 2 main features. The first one being a self-paced Udacity Nanodegree, which is online content that you consume. It usually typically takes around 10 hours per week or 2 hours per day, where you would consume lessons, videos, quizzes to explain the course material, supported by projects to really demonstrate the skills and the content that you learned. The second portion of this program, which is really unique to this program as well, is the mandatory virtual Connect sessions. So our Connect sessions are sessions where we pair you with a Udacity subject matter expert to support you to go through the content and to make sure that the concepts that you've learned and to discuss the concept that you've learned, to make sure that we are really applying the skills and the content demonstrated in the Nanodegree. So we check in on student progress, identify the most common blockers and help solve them. You can collaborate with your peers and network with your peers, and then work through the course material and project deadlines. If we can go to the next slide. Perfect. So how to apply? So our application process is actually a 3-step application process. Applicants or interested applicants can first start by taking a Udacity technical assessment. And this is essentially just for Udacity to check that you're just set up for success, just making sure that you have the right prerequisites to make sure that you will be successful in the program. It's a 30 to 45-minute application, and upon completion, within a couple of days, you will know if you've been shortlisted. The second step is to apply for the SkillsFuture Singapore subsidy. And this essentially is just to, so applicants actually have the opportunity to get up to 90% of the course fee subsidized by SkillsFuture, and that really depends on your citizenship status and your age. So depending on your age, you can either get up to 70% or 90%. So upon completion of both steps of the application and payment of the remainder of the course fee, you will then be enrolled on August 30th and really kickstart your learning journey with your other peers, with the rest of the peers also accepted into this program. And we will invite you to a virtual kickoff session where we will introduce you to the program, introduce you to all the different support avenues that you have, introduce you also to the subject matter experts from Udacity who will guide you and support you throughout the entire 3-month program. So applications are closing very soon, so there's only 11 days. They're closing on 21st of August. So if you're interested, make sure you can apply today. There's the link in this slide, which I'll share as well on the chat. And it will take you straight to the program website. It will show you a little bit more information about the program, the prerequisites that are required per nanodegree, and then how to apply as well. Thank you so much. That's it for me. And I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A section.
Yeah. So I wanted to end with a quote that I had found from a friend who, from Andoine. Knowledge has become obsolete. Knowing something is obsolete. And I was fascinated by that because I thought, how is that possible? And that's because knowing that thing isn't necessarily going to be useful for you in the future. Learning is the new currency. Being someone who is expanding their knowledge on a constant basis, where it's not transactional, just that I know it and I'm done, but I'm focused on knowing and learning. Learning is the new thing. If you aren't actively trying to learn, no one can help you. If you make it central to your personal and professional life, no one can stop you. And I want you to take that away and think about that, is that if you make it central to your personal and professional life, no one can stop you. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And now I think it's time for Zaina and I to take some questions.
Thank you so much, Kirk. So we have a question here from Shen. So he's asking, hi, Kirk, great presentation. In Singapore, there is quite an emphasis on qualifications like diplomas and degrees. It's quite a paper chase. What is the situation in the US or the rest of the world? Is there still the demand or relevance of degrees and such in a formal education setting? Or do you see changes or shifts in this area? Thank you.
That's a fantastic question. There are shifts that we're seeing, especially for people that are at the forefront of the technical revolutions. It's not as important to have a university degree when you're constantly innovating at the edge of technology. Because there isn't a university program that'll teach you what's there. I can guarantee you that most of the instructors at the universities they don't have their fingers on the pulses of the technology in the same way that the industries do. And so being able to kind of have your fingertips at the edge of the industry helps us build content, either at Udacity or other institutions like ourselves, build content that is actually at the cutting edge versus this is what a university is getting approved, and boy, they're going to teach that next year or next fall or next summer. We can actually build content, and industries can build content that actually is at the cutting edge. And so I think you're seeing more and more of the formalized education is a kind of, at anything, it's a proof point that you can get a formalized degree. But informal education, whether it be online education or supplementary education like we provide, shows that you're actually at the cutting edge versus in the kind of university model. So yeah, I see being more and more, evolving more and more to that.
I think that's the only question that we've received. If anyone else has any other questions, please do type them into the Q&A or to the chat. Perfect opportunity to ask Kirk while we have him. And just as an FYI, so Shen, thank you so much. You've also shared the application link. He shared it on the chat. So if you're interested, you can always check the chat and read more about the program. There's actually another question coming in. Could you talk a bit about the partners that Udacity works with to develop content?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we say at Udacity is we build content for industry by industry. And so we actually, during our ideation phase, when we're going to build new content, we're talking to industry experts, we're talking to the field, we're talking to cutting edge people in the technology world to say, what are you looking for? What do you need education is? Where do you think we need to be in 3 years? And so we're talking to partners all the time about what to put into our roadmap. And then once we have something that we know we want to build, we actually work with another set of industry experts to talk about how we want to scope the content, how deep do we want to go, what learning objectives are super important here. And then finally, we hire our instructors as outside experts. So we don't have internal people building our content. We have outside subject matter experts, working professionals in those fields, developing the content, developing the words, developing the exercises, developing all the workspaces with our instructional design team, because we want industry experts to put in the real life scenarios and real life projects that they see every day. And so those are kind of the 3 facets that we see the most interaction with our industry partners is ideation and coming up with the roadmap, building out the structure, the scope of the programs, and then actually building the content with us. All 3 of those are done by industry experts.
Thanks, Kirk. So we actually have 2 more questions come in.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is, do you think the free courses are worth it, or should we wait, or should we just jump into paid courses?
That's a really good question. If I talk about Udacity specifically, we curate even our free content. So the free content is stuff that we have built, and we feel strongly that it's going to be able to convey and teach you information that we feel strongly you'll need to know. If you say, should I just go watch videos on YouTube and will I learn something from that? That's a little more of a crapshoot. That's a little more of a 50-50, 70-20, kind of 70-30 kind of game. You just aren't going to know, because no one's curating whether that content's any good. And so I would recommend, even if you're going to access free content, do it on a platform that actually curates the content, something like Udacity, where we can tell you that the free content has value. Is it better to go with a paid course before you know you want to learn that topic? That's a little more difficult. I would always, if you're interested and have questions about that, it's always good to reach out to someone like a Udacity and have us tell you about our paid content. We can tell you exactly what's in it, maybe what you can learn from it, see if those outcomes match with the outcomes you think you want in your career, and then maybe dive into it.
Okay, thanks, Kirk. So another question is, may I know roughly how nanodegrees are equal to a normal degree?
It's a good question. So we often, if you're looking for whether or not, like, I take these 4 nanodegrees and it equals a master's in science and computer science, there is some level of parallelism between our multiples of our nanodegrees and what you would get in maybe a bachelor's or a master's program if you combine them together. They're not the same kind of content, obviously. We're not teaching you college content. We're teaching people job-ready content. There's a big difference there when you think about the motivation. At the end of your university career, you get a degree that says, I've learned what I need to know to graduate this university. But you don't necessarily learn what you need to know to be successful in your job. What we are doing is training you with the skills you need to be successful in your job. And so that's why a lot of our nanodegrees are learn to be a data analyst, learn to be a front-end web programmer. We're telling you, these are the skills, the technology skills you need to be successful, and you can be successful in that job. I think that if you wanted to have an equal comparison, the amount of effort that goes into a nanodegree program is about the same amount of effort you would see going into a semester or so of a degree. And so if you wanted to chain together intelligently a number of nanodegrees into a degree program, you could, but it would probably be 5, 7 nanodegrees into a degree program.
Great. There's another question, Kirk, that I guess me and you can both share. But
Sure.
the question is, are nanodegrees awarded for free by Udacity? So there's the element, I think, there that relates to the program. So the upcoming program that we have with Temasek Polytechnic, Noitgeit IT, is a program that you could receive up to 70 or 90% subsidy if you meet the requirements by SkillsFuture. So if you're interested in any of the 3 nanodegrees, AI programming with Python, intro to machine learning with TensorFlow, or a machine learning engineer nanodegree, you could apply to Udacity, and then if you're shortlisted, you can then apply to the SkillsFuture subsidy through Temasek Polytechnic. And then if you're eligible, you'll get up to 70% or 90% of the course fee subsidized. So you'll only have to pay for up to 30 or 10% of the remainder of the course fee. But that's what's currently available right now through this program. I don't know if Kirk, if there's any other elements that you'd like to cover from Udacity's standpoint.
Yeah, there oftentimes are special promotions that happen at various times in the year that can give you a significant discount on your nanodegree program, whether it be 50% off or something like that. I think as an educator at heart, I mean, this is I feel like in a lot of ways, this is my calling, is to be an educator. I'm able to see the difference between free education and paid education. There is a lot of value in having the curated content, having the expert content delivered to you in an effective and meaningful pedagogical way. You know, I think that it's easy to say, I can watch 10 videos, and after I watch those 10 videos, I get a certificate of completion that says I completed this course on X, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can actually do the job. It just means that you can watch someone doing the job. And I think the difference in the content that Udacity provides is that we are actually providing an opportunity to put your hands on the work, to actually do the work, and not just follow 5 steps that we tell you specifically to do, but actually open-ended projects that you have to complete, that a human being will give you feedback. That's where real learning is happening. Learning doesn't stop at the tell me and show me phase. It's tell me, show me, let me try, and then have someone give me feedback on my efforts. And so making sure that you get those last 2 parts in the learning experience, that you actually are able to try something on your own without specific direction, with just a goal, and then having someone give you feedback, it's just enormously valuable. So I would recommend, if you ever get the opportunity, always work in an ecosystem, a pedagogical ecosystem that gives you feedback on open-ended work.
Thanks so much, Kirk. I don't think there are any more questions. I think
someone named Felicia has raised her hand.
Maybe Celestine, you can take this. I'm not sure how we can.
Ladies and gentlemen, before the session ends, please scan the QR code and provide your feedback and comments on the webinar. And lastly, I would like to share with you about our Skills and Training Advisory Service. If you're not sure how to get started on your upskilling journey, you can sign up for the free one-to-one Skills and Training Advisory session, where our Skills Ambassador will guide you in understanding your career goals and provide suitable course recommendations. Simply scan on the QR code and indicate SFMX Smart Nation in the mandatory field, how do you hear about us, at the bottom of the registration form. Our Skills Ambassadors will contact you within 2 to 3 working days. We have come to the end of the webinar, and we thank you for joining us. Hope you have gained important insights from our speaker. Thank you, and hope to see you in the other sessions.